So I'm about to make a sourdough starter. I joined um, a website that was called the School of Traditional Skills. It's going to teach all kinds of things. And one of the things was sourdough. And I don't have a starter from someone, so I'm going to use her recipe to go ahead and do my start. So it's going to start with 1/4 cup of flour, 1/4 cup of water, and then do that for the next 5 to 7 days to get a good starter going. And I'm going to use some artisan bread flour and water to start, and we'll see how it goes. Okay, so I have mixed up the flour and water. Let me show you what I have here. There's the flour that I used, and I'm going to just use a glass mason jar here. Just mixed up that 1/4 cup of water, 1/4 cup of flour, and I actually went ahead and used my digital scale here just to make sure that I was putting exactly the right amount in, so that I can basically do as close as possible to prevent any types of failure. And if anything does happen, I could try to figure out what that is. But anyway, day one, we'll see what happens as we continue. Okay, now I'm going to do the day 2 of the sourdough starter. I'm going to have to discard half and then replenish. And I decided to buy a larger jar just to make it easier to get my hand in. It's going to be probably too big for the starter, where the starter is probably just going to be in the very bottom of the jar. But I wanted to make sure it was easy for me to get my hand in and out, so let me show you what I've got. Okay, so I started with just a regular mason jar here. The starter's in there, and then I just bought this large wide mouth jar that I'm going to use instead, which will be a lot easier for me to do the discard, or taking out what I will need when I start making the bread. Okay, here we are after taking out half and then adding in more flour and water. So we're on day 2 in the bigger jar. Okay, so I've already stirred this up again a little bit, and I'm going to be taking out quite a bit, making sure I just have another 1/4 cup, and then I'll do a 1/4 cup of flour, 1/4 cup of water, stirred up, let it sit again for the next 24 hours. So today is the 7th day since I started making the sourdough starter, and it doesn't really seem to be doing much. I have tried bread flour, I've tried all-purpose flour, but I think what I'm going to do, there's 4 different things that I'm going to test and see what happens. So the first is I'm going to move it back from the big jar to the little jar and see if that helps. One thing is try whole wheat flour and not the all-purpose or bread flour. One is not put the actual lid on and maybe just put a towel over it. Some people have said leaving it uncovered will help, although I've seen other people say there was enough yeast in the air when you put the lid on the jar that it should have yeast to start to ferment. And the other thing is have it in a warmer place. Garth likes to keep it a little bit chilly here, and I tried putting it in our oven, but our oven is actually electric, not gas, but I thought, well, maybe it might be slightly warmer in there than it is with just the regular air. But I'm thinking when I start working again upstairs and I have to turn the heat on, it's definitely warmer up there, so I may take it up there with me as well. So I'm going to try those few things out, see what happens, and hopefully one or more of those changes will get this to start really bubbling and fermenting and doing its thing. So it is now Sunday, 1 week and a day after I started the sourdough starter. I did try a couple other things the last few days to see if that helped, and it still doesn't seem to have made much of an impact. I did put it back into a smaller mason jar one day, and then yesterday I just covered with a towel instead of the lid. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem to still be doing all that much. But let me show you what I've got. Okay, so here's my jar. You can see the line, and it only went up a little bit more above where it started, and it's not all that bubbly. So again, I'm going to just add kind of part whole wheat flour and part all-purpose flour, unbleached, and we'll see what happens. Okay, so it is now Tuesday, a week and a half since I started my starter, and I found a video a couple days ago that was talking about how a lot of times people give false information if your starter doesn't seem to be doing anything, like feed it 122 or 155 or something like that. And he explained that if you are discarding before it has really risen and peaked, that you could actually be weakening your starter because you're taking out too much of the yeast. So for one day, I let it just sit. I didn't discard it, didn't add anything else. And then Garth put his sous vide together, and we put it in there because I think our kitchen is just too cold right now. And you might be able to hear it in the background. And so we put it in there, where he put the actual implement into a glass of water, but the dough itself is just sitting in the pot. So all it's doing is circulating warm air, and that seems to have worked. So last night it looked like it had kind of risen and started to fall. So then I fed it again, and now it's been in the sous vide overnight. So let's take a look. Okay, so here's my jar, and obviously the ribbon, the yarn, is where it started last night. So it's done a pretty good job of rising, but it's obviously not double. It hasn't completely peaked, so I'm just going to keep an eye on it today, see what happens, and then maybe we'll be making some bread soon. Okay, so you can see that this has gone very well today. I've got the sous vide still going because I'm just going to discard feed now and put it back in there to continue. But yay, it's doing much better. So I think it definitely was the temperature in the kitchen that kept it from growing. Okay, so we had to go out of town, so I put the starter in the refrigerator on Wednesday. Got back Saturday night, so I took it out, did a discard, fed it, let it do its thing overnight, and so now I'm working on bread. And then I also am making discard pancake dough, so let me show you what that looks like. All right, here we are, ready to go. Gonna have some pancakes, and then I can show you what the bread is doing as well. So it's in its first rise in the refrigerator. Okay, here's the dough in the banneton. Put it in before I went to church and came back. It said it should cold proof in here. So we'll see how it goes along. I'm not sure if it's the right consistency yet, but we're trying. Okay, we just ate pancakes that we made with the sourdough starter. Really yummy. I have one of the breads already downstairs doing kind of the cold proofing, which is going to be overnight, but I saw a different recipe that is not as detailed. I'm going to try that one as well and see what happens. If it comes out any better, worse, what's going to happen. But the one that I did this morning, you had to let it rest, do kind of the folding every 30 minutes 4 times, and then let it rest again, cold proof. This one, you just knead it longer, and then you put it into, the shape that you want, let it rise again while your oven is heating up, and then bake so it doesn't go as long. So I'm going to try that one as well, see what happens. Well, I had found 2 different recipes for how to make the sourdough, and I thought I would test both of them. So this morning, I just baked one of the loaves. This evening, I'll bake the other because the other one said to cold proof at least 1 full day. But anyway, I just took out the loaf from the oven. Let me show you what I have. Here we go. Can you hear that crackling? Anyway, looks really good. I have to let it sit and cool, but we'll try some later. Okay, it is time to cut into the bread and see what we've got. Okay, well, here it is. my first sourdough loaf. Now to taste it. All right, so the bread has been sliced and eaten. I think it's a little bit dense, but it was only the first loaf, so I'm sure I'll be learning more as I do it. Gar said it tasted great, so at least the bread will not go to waste. And it was yummy, just I think not as airy as I think I would like. Well, Garth is in the kitchen cutting some bread that I just took out of the oven, which I think is probably worse than the first one I did. This particular one, it seemed like the dough was more sticky. He says it looks good, we'll see, but it was more sticky, and it just seemed like the dough kind of spread out a little bit when I was waiting to put it in the oven. But anyway, to me it looks like a flying saucer. But we'll see how it tastes, and I'll just keep learning. So yesterday I made another loaf of sourdough bread, which turned out pretty well. And so I have discard, and I found a recipe for shortbread cookies using sourdough discard. So I'm going to see how those turn out. So right now I just have it in a log. So you can see I made the dough, and then I've just formed it into a log. I'm going to refrigerate this. It says it has to refrigerate at least a couple of hours, and then slice and bake. So we'll see how those turn out.